Okay, hi everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us today for our Adding Amazon Listings 301 session, where today we'll be walking through how to fill out an inventory file. My name is Yas and I'm part of the Seller University team. We'll also want to introduce our presenters for today. We have David and Eric, who are both part of our seller recruiting team as account reps. And with that, I'll pass it off to Eric to get us started.
Thank you, Yas. The focus of this training will be on inventory files and some best practices to follow that can limit blockers and friction when making edits to your listings in the future. Inventory files can help you save time and optimize efficiency when adding or editing products in bulk. After today's session, you'll be able to download and fill out relevant inventory file templates, including variations to create and manage your listings. Inventory files are spreadsheets with multiple data columns for product attributes and information. You can create file templates to fit your specific requirements and list different product types across multiple categories with one single template. As a reminder, to find an inventory file template, open the Seller Central main menu, hover over Catalog, and select Add Products via Upload. Next, click the Download Spreadsheet tab at the top of the page. If you're adding offers for products that already exist in the Amazon catalog, you'll click the Get Listing Loader button. If you're adding new products to the Amazon catalog, click Get Product Template, which you can use also to edit product details and offer information. Click the Get Price and Quantity Template button to download a template you can use to update price and quantity values for existing listings. For category-specific templates, click the Get Other Templates button and select Learn More next to category-specific inventory files. On this page, you'll find a list of category-specific file templates with associated style guides and browse tree guides. Any requirements for each template will be listed in an Approval Required column on the right of the page. Now we're going to transition to our live demonstration of filling out an inventory file template. This file template is for new listing creation for generic, private label, and branded sellers. An important note is if you are listing generic and have plans to private label or file for brand registry with a registered trademark, it is highly advised that you go through the GTIN exemption and or 5665 brand name approval process, as you won't be able to update a generic listing in the future per Amazon policy to be associated to a brand. Now I'm going to transition this over to David so he can walk you through a live demonstration.
All right, thank you, Eric. All right, let's get started on filling out this inventory file. So quickly, we're going to download a file. And as you just saw, we're going to start in Seller Central at the navigation menu. We're going to go to Catalog, Add Product via Upload. And we are going to start on the Download Spreadsheet tab. Just quickly take note of these other two tabs here at the top because we will be coming back here closer to the end of our presentation. As Eric went over, we talked about the listing loader templates and some of the other files that we have here for sellers to use to upload and modify products, but we are specifically going to be covering creating new listings in the Amazon catalog. So we're going to choose this template that states list products not currently in Amazon's catalog. Once we choose this option, we need to signify which marketplace we are going to be listing in. So in this case, we're going to do Amazon.com. Once we select there, we end up on our product selection page. And in this example, I'm going to start with a few different product examples so we can look at what happens with the file as we start to go through and fill in some data. So I'm going to choose an oil filter. We're going to use the search bar here, and this makes it pretty easy. Once we hit search, we're going to look at all the relevant categories specifically, and then the specific breakdown. So in this case, we will hit select for our most important or most relevant category, and then we'll see that the product actually populates down here below. I'm going to add a couple more products. We'll do a pet toy. We'll do a chew toy here. It sounds like a good one. So you can see chew toys have added down there at the bottom, and then we'll also do some pants, maybe get some apparel in here. And sure, we'll do some men casual pants. So we'll add that as well. So we'll scroll down, we'll confirm that we've got 3 product selections. Again, you can choose multiple marketplaces if you plan to list in Europe or in Japan as well. Again, in this case, we're just going to use .com. And you also have the ability to adjust different languages here. Again, we're going to stay in English. So we're going to generate the template. We're going to populate this template down here in the lower left section of our browser. And we're just going to click it and it will open up here in Excel in just a second. So let me drag this over here and let's take a look. So when you open a file, we end up on the instructions page. And this is just a really high level overview, goes over how to use the file, some quick descriptions on data definitions, specific requirements or optional fields, covers some valid values, images, tabs. We're actually going to go more in depth on those real quick. In every single file that you can download from Amazon, we give you these tabs here at the bottom in the lower left. And we're going to run through those real quick because these oftentimes help answer questions and get you moving forward on these flat file uploads. So on the images tab, we're going to cover specific image examples here in the center, some do's and don'ts. Here's an example, non-white background, that won't work. White background, we'd be good to go on this image. On the left-hand side here, we cover some of the image standards, main images, additional images, image size, naming, formatting, and specifically uploading your image files. Really good information on these pages, so it is a huge benefit to kind of run through these on your first file upload. When we toggle to the example tab, it's exactly that. It's an example file filled in with some example values for each different attribute specifically. So this is kind of your study guide as far as how to fill in a file and be successful in doing so. The data definitions tab is going to give you definitions on Amazon's specific attributes. So we've got field name and label name. This basically tells you what you're filling in. And then we'll give you a brief statement on definition and how to use it, an example of an accepted value, an actual value, and then is the attribute required or not. So very important to also review the required section here because that does become important. Template is where we are going to fill in the product. We're going to skip over that for 1 second. Browse data is the subcategory that you chose, and then also the path that we have to find that subcategory. So we start at the parent category, which is pet supplies. We go through dogs, toys, and chew toys, and that's our subcategory. So that's the breakdown here on the browse data page. And then last but not least is the valid values tab. This is a super important tab because this file and most all Amazon files will have valid values for specific attributes. And what that means is when you click in a cell that has a valid value, there's going to be a drop-down menu, and you basically have to choose one of the options from the drop-down for that specific attribute. And then of course we'll go over that specifically as we start to fill in our template. So real quick, I'm going to freeze the column on the left-hand side here because it's going to be important to remember what product type we are working on. But now we're actually going to start to input some data and watch what happens with this file. So we're going to go in, we're going to hit the drop down, and we're going to choose our 3 different product types that we are going to talk about today. So I only chose 3 different product types in this example just to show the different activity that happens with this file. In many cases, if you're a seller, you're probably listing very similar products, and we'll modify this file slightly at the end and talk more specifically about variations. But I want to go through each section of this file briefly and talk about some of the main points, things to make sure you fill in, and some specific things to look at. So once we have product type filled in, we saw the first thing that happened was our file outlined some of these cells in red. And what the red means is it's a minimum required field for listing creation. So if we do not fill in some of these fields, we'll get an error from the system that lets us know we missed a step. So it's incredibly important to make sure that required fields are filled in as you're starting to go through this process. So we would start here in column B after filling in column A to determine what's required, and we would start to plug away at our data. So seller SKU, very common question we get is what is that? That's basically just an identifier that the seller gets to use for the product individually. So in this case, if it's a pet toy, we could just type in pet toy, something like that, very basic. You can actually leave these blank and allow Amazon to generate a SKU for you, but it is recommended that you create your own SKU as you're creating listings for your brand specifically. Brand name, very, very important column. And a couple things to call out here, which we've gone over in 101 and 201 of our listings webinar series as well. But brand name is super important. When you're creating new listings, you want to make sure that you get all the approvals needed for the brand name prior to creating the listing. So if you're a private label seller, go through the brand name approval policy. If you're a brand owner and you have a trademark for your brand, make sure you start with brand registry and get your brand name approved that way first, because that makes everything go so much smoother and there's a lot less back and forth. So once we have our brand name approved, we'll plug in our brand name and then we'll continue moving on. Product ID is your product identifier in the way of a universal product code, or UPC, sometimes also referred to as a GTIN or EAN code. Many people who come to list on Amazon will already have UPC codes. One of our biggest recommendations is that you purchase these codes from gs1.org. That is one company that Amazon does work with, and we validate those barcodes so they work pretty much flawlessly within our system, and everything typically flows smoother when we use product barcodes from that company. Once we have our product ID filled in, we would then signify what type of barcode it is. Again, here is a list of valid values. So if we got a barcode from GS1, we would then signify that it is a UPC or a GTIN code. The other thing to note here is you can request a UPC exemption from Amazon, and you just have to provide some product data and images about your product, and then oftentimes you can get approval. If you get approved for your brand in a specific category, when you go in to create a listing, even though these are required fields and they're outlined in red, if that exemption has been granted to you, you can indeed leave these blank, and that's totally okay. All right, moving on. Next most important thing, product name. That is your product's title, and that's the first bit of information your customer is going to see as they start to search through the results and look at products. So it's important to be a little bit more descriptive in the title. Don't just say what the product is. Maybe give a little bit more information and entice that customer to click onto the listing. We can now start to see that some of these attributes are required where other ones are not. So for these pants, manufacturer is actually not required, but it's still recommended that any attribute that makes sense for your product, you fill it in. And the reason why we want to do that is we're building a strong foundation with our listing and ensuring that we have enough information here that when your customers start to land on these detail pages, they can really make that educated buying decision. So here's actually a perfect example. Product description is the description of your product. You get 2,000 characters in this box, so it can be a good sized paragraph. But if you notice, it's only actually required for pet toy. I would not put in a description for any product. You always want to have a product description. These all should be required. So this is a very important attribute. Make sure that you fill this one in. Item type keyword, very easy. You've got a drop down. Each one should auto populate for the product that you're listing. So it's very easy to fill that in. Now we're going to start to skip over some of the columns and start to go through the sections specifically. But remember, any of these attributes, if they are outlined in red, you want to fill it in. And if it makes sense for your product, you want to fill it in as well. Some of these will have drop downs that you can choose from based off of the previous value entered. So in this case, for our pet toy, if it was unit count 1, Unit count of measure would be count. If it was some sort of liquid and it was 12 ounces, we could put 12 and then choose fluid ounce or ounce, right? So our file does as much as it can for you, but there's still some manual inputs that will be needed by the seller. So we're going to start to cruise over here to the right, and you will start to see that the file is quite large. This is going to be a larger file than what you'll usually see, and that's because I chose 3 different product types. So we've stuffed all the attributes associated with these 3 products into this one file. So that's why it looks really big. Actually, before I move on, I want to call out a couple things. You can see there's some gray filled in boxes here. That means skip over that attribute. It's not needed for this specific product type. So we're going to go to one of the next sections here, which is images. Actually, before we get there, one quick thing to call out. For our pants listing here, we can see there was a couple of red boxes, but then we also have a couple orange boxes. These are suggested fields to fill in. Now, obviously for pants, this one is bottom size. So for pants, we definitely want to let our customer know if it's a size 25, large, extra large, based off of years. You have all sorts of values in here. So depending on what size your pants are, you can go in and fill in the valid value. Super, super important. All right, on to images. Images is obviously a very important section as well because that's how people know exactly what they're buying. So images, you can bulk upload your images, but you have to use a direct image link. And what that means is you have to have the image hosted somewhere, whether that's on a third-party photo hosting site, or if that's on your own website. If you have a website for your brand or the products that you sell, you can put that direct link in here. And what that link looks like, it looks like a web link, but it ends in .jpeg or .jpg. So if you have images, you can load them that way. If you don't have images hosted on a website, you can leave this entire section blank. And after the listings have been created, you can load them manually from your computer, clicking the edit button for the listing. We're going to skip over the variation section quickly. I am going to spend a good amount of time on this section at the end, but I want to get through the rest of the sections of this file briefly here. So we're going to talk about the basic section. This again covers some very basic information about the different product types that you might be listing. Again, really make sure to take note of what the attribute is, and if it makes sense for your product, be sure to fill it in. So in this case, we've got our pants, product care instructions, machine wash, right? So we give you some options there, and you're able to fill that in. And again, inform your customer on the best way to clean that product specifically. Next section is the discovery section. And I'm going to highlight these three columns right here. Actually, let's do yellow. These sections, key product features, these are actually the bullet points that appear on the listing page. And bullet points are incredibly important. You get 5 of them for most products. Some products you get a couple more. It is in your best interest as the seller trying to sell these products to really fill these in and be very clear and concise on the bullet points for the product. This information shows beneath the title and the brand of the product. It shows right to the right of the images and to the left of the featured offer. So incredibly important information and a great way to really capture your buyer's attention. Another section that is very commonly overlooked is the search terms. Search terms are a great way to help you populate in more search results. And if you have words or phrases that don't make sense in your bullet points or your product description, this is a great place to add them. You have 250 characters that you can add. You do not need to use a comma, a space is fine. You also don't need to repeat words, and you cannot use any brand names in this section. So very, very important to take notes on your search terms. All right, we are going to continue on through this file. Again, take note of some of these attributes that are in this green discovery section. Material type, probably important for pants or pet toys, color, size, flavor, scents, Lots of things, lots of good information that we can really give our customers, ability to make those informed decisions. We've got some OEM related attributes here for our oil filters. So if you have a OEM part number that it matches up to, you can use that as well. Included components, if you're selling pants and it comes with a belt, you could include that in here. As we continue on, you can see there's a lot of attributes, and again, that's because we've got multiple product types here. There's a little bit of vehicle compatibility. If you have a oil filter and it only works with certain vehicles, you can add that information in here, which is super helpful for your customers to make sure they're buying a product for the right vehicle. And of course, as you download different file types, we're going to give you different attributes based off of that product. So if you don't see an attribute here that makes sense for your product, rest assured it's probably in the file when you download it for your specific product type. All right, so we're going to run through the discovery section, make it to product enrichment. Product enrichment is typically item specifics, like here's a flashpoint, shelf life, any legal compliance certification needed, recycled content percentage, some really good information that the customers would definitely be interested in. We're going to continue through here to the dimensions section. Very, very important section. People want to know the size and the weight of products. Very important to add that into these sections to, again, allow those informed decisions when customers are shopping through the marketplace. Dimensions is item specific, not packaging specific. So make sure you remember that when filling this out. Dimensions are for the item itself. So if you're selling a table and when it's built, it's 2 feet by 4 feet by 3 feet tall, those are the measurements that you want to use in the dimensions section. When we continue on forward, when we get to the fulfillment section, using that table as an example, that's where we would put the package dimensions. So more than likely our table is not shipped to the customer fully assembled. It's taken apart in a box. So we would input the box information in the fulfillment section. A couple other things to call out: if you are going to be a fulfilled by Amazon seller and you're going to send your product into our fulfillment centers, there is an option here for you to set the item up as Amazon NA. That's for Amazon North America. That means FBA is going to fulfill your product. Or you can do default, and that means merchant fulfilled. Again, either way you go, still really good to fill in specific package dimensions. Moving on to the next section, we're going to cover compliance real quick. This is just any regulatory information, any warnings that somebody needs to know about, allergies specifically, storage instructions is an option for the pet toy. What else is in here? Specific uses for product, that's a really good one. If you're doing FBA, you need to put in, is this product a battery? You also would need to put in, where are we? Applicable dangerous goods. So in that fulfillment center section, if we signified it was fulfilled by Amazon, these would actually open up and allow us to fill in the data. Moving right along, we're going to end up in the offer section, bright red, and for a reason. This is where your pricing information is going to go. So we've got list price, minimum advertised price. We've got handling time, which is important if you're going to take longer than 2 days to ship out a product. We've got sale pricing options in here, so you can run a sale on your item should you want to. Some other really important attributes in this section as well. And then last but not least is the B2B section. This section is where you can upload business pricing and business discounts for your customers and allow them to, when they log in using their Amazon business account, this shows these types of offers. So if you're selling a lot of product, you can actually offer discounts if somebody buys 10, 5, 100, so on and so forth. So B2B pricing is always a great way to go, and it just opens up your ability to sell to more customers. Now, we are going to go back and we're going to talk specifically about variations, but I'm going to modify this file slightly, and we're just going to pretend that we're listing a pet toy only. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to modify a couple of these so everything aligns, and you can see now all the required fields are the same. So what we need to do when creating a parent-child variation, and again, we covered this in 201. So if you haven't, if you missed that webinar, you definitely want to go back because there's going to be some important information there. But what we want to do is we want to signify which listing is going to be our parent, and I like to do that by highlighting it because that tells me specifically that it's a parent. And then I'm going to call this, I'm going to change the SKU for my parent, and I'm going to call it pet toy dash parent. And that just helps me signify that I know exactly which one of these listings is the parent. And as we talked about in 201, a parent is not a buyable offer. So we will not put in details for the parent that make our system think it's an actual product. So for example, UPC information, we can leave that blank. Yes, that's a required field, but not for a parent. So we're going to pretend that this is blue and this one is red. So I'm just going to put these SKUs in here. Again, seller SKU, you can use anything that you want. It's totally up to you. So now that we've signified that we've got a parent listing and we're going to have two children variations, we're going to go back to that variation section. Now again, just assume that we've filled in all of the other product details. And now that we've done that, we want to group everything together correctly. And this is exactly why I like to highlight the parent, because when I get to this section, I can see exactly which one the parent is. So I know right away, this is the parent. I know these two are the children. So I'm going to make these children. Again, we've got valid values here. For parent SKU, it's incredibly important that we copy exactly the same SKU. So I'm going to go over there. I'm going to copy that guy. I'm going to come back to the variations section, and we're going to put the parent SKU only in the two children listings. So I'm actually going to take this and I'm going to make it red because we do not want to put a parent SKU in the variation section for the parent listing specifically. The reason why is if we did, our system would think that this is going to be a variation of the parent, which again confuses everything and would create an error. Moving on to the next attribute is relationship type. For relationship type, we have valid values. We're going to choose variation. These two children are a variation of our parent. So what does that mean? That also means that the relationship type in the variation section, the parent attribute is left blank. So relationship type and parent SKU for this parent listing on line 4 here, these will be left blank in every single variation that's created. If we put a value in here, our system is going to automatically think that it is a real listing. Since we have a red pet toy and a blue pet toy, we are going to choose the variation theme for color. So you can see in this drop down here, based off of the item type that we're listing, which is a pet toy, we've got a ton of different options. These are all the different variation themes that you can choose from. You can see we've got one part variations. Here's an example, which is color, which we will use. And then there's two part variations like size color. So if you had two different sizes of these pet toys and two different colors, you actually have 4 total listings. So you can do a 2-part variation. We're just going to cover a single part in this example, but the 2-part variation would be basically the same. So for the variation theme, we are going to make sure that the theme is the same for all the listings, including the parent. Incredibly important, because if we don't do this correctly, they will not group together. All right, so at this point, the variation section for these listings is complete. We have our two children listings, we have our parent, we've signified the variation theme, which ones are variation, most importantly, which one is the parent. And the last step we need to do is we need to fill in the color because that's the variation that we chose. So we are going to look for color specifically. So I just hit Control F in this file. That brings up the search box. I'm going to type in color, and we are going to find the color attribute. Super, super important here. So I think the first one we did was blue, and I think the second one we did was red. So all we have to do is fill in blue and red accordingly. And then again, the parent section is not going to get a color because that would signify that it's a real product and a buyable offer, and that is not something that we are going to fill in. So we're going to leave color blank for the parent and only fill in the children attribute for the colors. Now, color is an interesting variation on Amazon because there's actually one extra step. So we need to also find the color map section. And the reason why we do that is not everybody wants to use standardized colors. Let's just use the example that this wasn't actually red and we wanted to call it raspberry. So we can type in our color name there, but we need to tell the system what these colors actually are. So we need to find this attribute called color map. And we're going to search for that, and we're going to find it right here. So we can see color map is another attribute. Again, we can see that the parent has this highlighted, so we're going to skip over that. And again, that's why I like to highlight the whole line for the parent specifically. And we're going to go here and we're just going to match the color for blue because blue didn't change. But our raspberry, we don't have raspberry as an option in our dropdown. So in this case, we would choose the next best option. So raspberry could be red, could be pink. Choose the one that makes the most sense, right? So we're just going to choose red in this case. Once we've filled that in correctly and all of our other attributes are filled in as well, obviously the minimum required ones, as well as any of the attributes that made sense for our product, we're going to save this file and save it on our desktop. And then we're going to go back to Seller Central. We're going to go back to our Add Product via Upload page, and we're going to go to the Upload Your Spreadsheet tab. From there, all we need to do is either drag and drop the file right in this box, or we can click the Browse Files box, select the correct file, and then upload it. We can send ourselves an email alert for once the list or the file has done processing, and we'll get a notification in our inbox once that's done. One of the things that our system will do is in this section, we'll let you know quickly if we detect any errors before your upload. And if so, take a note of those and make sure to address them prior to an upload. Once the file has processed, we will actually be able to see the status and what's happened on the spreadsheet upload status page. We would display some information down here below. We would see the status and how many of the listings went through. So in our example file, we had three listings for pet toys, one of them actually a parent, two of them children. So in reality, it's only two products, but it would show as three listings. And if we were successful, it would say 3 out of 3. And then we would have an option to look at the processing report. If there's any type of error, it will say 0 out of 3, 1 out of 3, 2 out of 3, basically anything but the full amount. And then you would have the option to download your processing report on the right-hand side. Now, the nice thing about Amazon processing reports is you can actually use the template tab on the processing report as your file. So you can fix any errors, anything that might have been missed in that processing report, save that file, and then come back to your upload spreadsheet page, drop it, and as long as you resolve those errors, you will be ready to go. Your product should list within your manage inventory page. And then from there, you can either continue to add more products, set up your FBA shipment, start to advertise, whatever your next plan was going to be.